In this video, we're going to go over the business proposal submitted by one of the groups of students in my class. This was the A+ consulting firm. That's what they named themselves. I did take their names out of here to sanitize the information, but we're going to go ahead and go over their submission. So it is uploaded to the course on Udemy, but I'm going to go ahead and pull up the PDF so it's easier to read for this video. So let me go ahead and scroll the PDF over, and let's go ahead and make this a bit easier to read. And so what you'll notice is that when you're going through this process, remember that business requirements are going to lead to technical requirements, and that's the process that they went about. You go through the planning process, you find out the business requirements, you then determine the technical requirements, and then you design the network. And so in their final proposal, let me go ahead and make this a bit larger, they go over the business requirements, they go over the overall network design plan, they have a physical design, they have a logical design where they set up the logical topology and the IP addressing, and then they do a cost breakdown to show that the proposal is within the financial resource constraints. And so, I'm not going to go over everything in here. I just really want to focus on the actual physical design for the scope of this course, but I do want to scroll through this. So you'll notice here is that they talk about the business requirements, and they have an overall network design plan in place, and then they go ahead and they talk about the physical design and all the aspects of it. They talk about how they're going to be storing the data, how they're going to be backing up the data. They talk about their cabling, what type of cabling they're going to use, and how that meets the requirements of the business. And then they have the physical design. And so this is what we really want to focus on for this class. And let me zoom in a bit more so you can see this a bit better. And so you'll notice that they have Cat 6, Cat 6E, and they have their AC power listed in here as well. And so based upon the design that they wanted for the scenario for the business, you'll notice here that they satisfy that design. So they have the internet connection here going into a router, and then they have a firewall to protect the local area network of the business. And what you'll notice off the firewall here is that they have multiple different ports. And so they have the firewall going off to the public Wi-Fi access here for the reception area down here. And so that's for the clients to access that information. And because it's going to the firewall is going to protect the rest of the network. And so they're only going to have access based upon what we configure in the firewall to protect the network. Again, over here they have their file server on a different port on the firewall. So again, we can set up different rules, so only certain people and certain types of applications and network traffic have access to that file server. And then again, another port going off the firewall into the internal network for the business. And what you'll notice also within here is that they have a backup power supply going all to all the different primary devices to ensure that if the power goes out, then the network is still up and running. And then off this firewall, they have a mesh design of the network. So remember that Ron and Jeff stated that they needed to ensure that their network had adequate fault tolerance and redundancy. Well, they made sure that they put a mesh in place right here on the core network. So they have two switches instead of one. And you'll notice one switch goes over to here, over to the reception area where we have their receptionist computer and the laptop, sorry, not the laptop, but the networked printer. And then over here, you'll notice that it's mesh, so if for some reason one of these ports goes down, it can still access across. And then over here, we have the private Wi-Fi set up for our paralegal. So wherever the paralegal is in within the office, they have access to Wi-Fi in the network. And then you'll notice that we have redundant lines over here going to another switch on the mesh network, going to Ronald and Jeff's office. And so we have the switch here. We have the redundancy built in, and they both have their own printers, they both have their own computers, and they both have their own backup supplies. And so you'll notice, based upon how they design this, they set up an adequate level of fault tolerance and redundancy in place with a mesh network. And you'll also notice that they went above and beyond the design. They also put a closed caption TV type of a camera setup for security cameras, and that includes a DVR, so they're always monitoring everything going on in the office, and if anybody breaks in, then they have that information to give it to the police if for some reason data and information is stolen. And so that's their physical design. Now they also talk about the logical design, and again, we didn't talk about how to subnet and do our IP addressing in detail. So I don't expect you to understand this, but I do want to go over it. So they talk about their internet connection in regards to the logical design. They're stating they're using a T1 line to make sure they have adequate bandwidth. They do have a mesh design for redundancy and fault tolerance, which I talked about. They have their access points in place so different people can access different areas on the network. So remember, we have our public Wi-Fi, we have our private Wi-Fi on the network. And they talk about their computers and printers on the network, their file server, their backup server to back up their data. And if we keep going down, this is the actual logical design here where we have our IP addressing in place. And like I said, we didn't go over the IP addressing in this course to the point where I expect you to know how to go ahead and subnet and assign IP addresses, but we will go ahead and quickly take a look at this because based upon this logical design, we can see how this is set up again in a secure manner. So again, we have a router here, we have our firewall, and our internet is over here, a T1 line coming in. We have our firewall here, and on one port to the firewall, we have our file server, where they're also backing up their data. Again, we have another one where we have our public access point for our clients to access their network and to access the internet. But when the clients access this, when it goes to the firewall, they can only access out to the internet. They don't have access to the file server, or they don't have access to the internal network over here. And then off of the firewall, you notice that they have a mesh set up. So you'll notice they have a full mesh between these switches here. We have 1, 2, 3 switches. On this firewall, we have a full mesh, almost a full mesh, a partial mesh, because we don't have direct from here to here. And so, for example, if one of the cables goes down, we can still get across and so forth. And if one of the switches go down, we can easily reroute by plugging into another switch. We have the receptionist computer. We have the network printer for the office down here. And over here, we have another switch that connects the two different owners, Jeff and Ronald's computers, and their own personal printers. And then lastly, the internal wireless access point for the internal network for their paralegal as well. And if Ronald and Jeff want to get a laptop as well, they can access the network via Wi-Fi as well. And then lastly, they do a cost breakdown of all the equipment, and it gives a total summation of the cost, and then a conclusion. So I did go over this quickly. We went over this in about 7 minutes. My recommendation is that if you want to really look into this and look into the fine details, I do recommend just, either printing this off or downloading it and just browsing through it leisurely on your own, because it's going to give you more insight into the overall process. I just didn't want to spend 30 minutes going over every single aspect of their 11-page proposal. I just wanted to give you a quick highlight overview and really focus on the physical design and kind of talk about the logical design to see how we took that initial case study, and then we took that case study, and as students of this course, we can take that and put it into a physical design. So we take those business requirements, we turn them into technical requirements in our planning process, in our design process, and then we design our network. So if you have any questions about this case study, let me know. Now, you might find some flaws in the design, and that's perfectly fine because, again, these were undergraduate business students. This was their first networking course, like many of you here on Udemy. So I don't expect you to have a perfectly 100% perfect design network. You are going to have flaws here and there, but that's okay. It's a learning process, and I just want to show you that what you can come up with on your own once you complete a course like this. So again, if you have any questions, let me know. If not, thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the next video.